Hello, everyone. I see we have a couple attendees in the audience. I just want to welcome you. I think we'll give it just a couple of minutes before I actually start the event here, but I did want to recognize and say hello to everybody. I am going to attempt to unmute everyone so that you can have ability to ask a question at will. I believe that you'll have to go to your speaker and unmute yourself, but as an organizer, I believe that we have everyone in an unmuted position. Okay. So I hope everybody's been enjoying the new normal, as they say. We've had some trying times over the past several months, and one of them is how to deal with having a conference. Since we can no longer gather and enjoy each other's company in New Orleans as we had planned about a month ago, we've decided to go ahead and make use of our presentations and our wonderful speakers that have submitted these great abstracts. Anyway, excuse me, I got distracted for a minute with a bing. I'm still getting new to this webinar type event. So welcome to the September series speakers from CMSC 2020. Right now, we are trying to end our first week of virtual conference with a casual cocktail happy hour for women in metrology. That being said, not being restricted to women at all. We do invite everybody to join in because it's everybody's opinion that matters and counts. So want to make sure that I've introduced my two cohorts in the background. I have Keith Bevan and Matt Ilardo, who are our chairs for the Coordinate Metrology Society. And I'm happy to have them on board in the background as organizers and my backup support. And that's what CMSC is really kind of about, is backup support. What we need in support is knowledge too. So that's one of the things that CMSC is all about, is knowledge, education, and getting together and sharing it amongst one another. So today, let's see, I'm having trouble advancing to the next slide, unfortunately. There we go. Welcome. It's a cocktail hour, so I invite you to kick back, take off your shoes, relax. I would like to ask you to unmute yourself, and when you have anything that you'd like to throw in, by all means, you're invited to join in. This is by no means supposed to be a webinar or a panel discussion where I do all the talking. So I'm inviting everybody to join in. And over on the right-hand side, you'll have control of your microphone. So I'm going to do that again, where I tried to unmute everybody so that you have your own control of your microphone. So again, it's a relaxed time, so grab your glass, your cup of joe, cup of tea, cocktail glass, beer, whatever it happens to be, glass of water, relax, enjoy, and let's just, kick back. And I've got a couple topics just to talk about and kind of get the thing going and hopefully generate some banter amongst us. So let's see. Again. All right. Well, a lot of you have heard us call CMSC, CMS, quite different, and now we've got a new acronym, WIM. And what are they? What do they all mean? A lot of times you'll see the acronyms, but you won't see the meanings behind them. So CMSC is the Coordinate Measurement Systems Conference. That's what we originally started out with in 1984. And it kind of began as an idea that was tossed about by a bunch of people who were basically in the tooling industry and needed to establish some standards when it came down to targets, especially shank size and offset. And thus was born mutual cooperation between users of technology and actually pushing the edge of technology and the providers of this technology and implements that we needed, the items. So from 1984 till about 2005, we were just known as the Coordinate Measurement Systems Conference. A group of people who got together, discussed commonalities, and as things grew, well, we just started presenting more and more papers. Excuse me a minute. About 2006, we were realizing we were growing, and about then we decided to go ahead and change our name to the Coordinate Metrology Society, thus keeping the same base for CMS. And it was a Coordinate Metrology Society that puts on the Coordinate Metrology Systems Conference. Excuse me. And around that same time, we wanted a way to preserve all of these great presentations and papers that were being developed by our community, and thus was born the Journal of the CMSC. So many of you who are members of our society are receiving the journal in the mail. Yes, the snail mail. We are, we have a dilemma there. We really like the hard publication, and maybe we'll hear from our members on what they prefer. We really want to keep that hard paper production of the Journal of the CMSC, but as many people know, print items are almost a thing of the past nowadays. Rounding that out, we have WIM, Women in Metrology. That is thus a little bit of a growth out of the Coordinate Metrology Society. This is by no means an exclusive subcommittee. It is just a get-together of people to really just kick back. There's no formal structure to the meeting, but more of a kind of a networking event. Again, not limited to women only, but yes, if we are topics of discussion, they may be more focused on women than on men. So if you want to join on the conversation, more than welcome to have you. Come on in. Well, to kind of get things going, I thought it might be good for us to take a look back in history and take a look at women and their place in, I should have actually put science first, mathematics, and then metrology, because of course science did start before, they really thought about making an exclusive niche for metrology. But, women in any of these areas, they are just not very common. It has been a very male-dominated world for so long. So how did these few particular women kind of rise above and choose a different path than most of their colleagues, the other girls that they grew up with? Here's a great photo. I haven't really been able to find much about the women in this photo, except that it's a photo from 1918, and it's an all-female crew. I mean, look at their level rods. That's amazing. I just love the pattern on it. And they were up in the Nebraska area. So great image there. Somebody who's always captured my interest has been Hedy Lamarr. She's very well known. She's a movie starlet, okay? That's as most people know her from all of the Hollywood movies, and she's a very beautiful and glamorous actress. And we all know that, or we all stereotype is that if you're a beautiful and glamorous actress, well, you probably aren't very smart. But Hedy Lamarr was quite an amazing woman. Even from the time that she was born, her father took an interest in her and took her with him on his walks around, and they would talk about different items, like maybe an automobile or a bicycle, or other items that had mechanical doings, and he encouraged her to ask questions about how these things are put together, how did they operate. So that being said, dad shows her the mechanical world, but mom goes ahead and takes her and gives her dancing lessons and acting lessons, and she does get into the acting business in Germany. But as typical, they're supposed to get married, so early on she does get married to a wealthy man who's a munitions manufacturer. So she's sitting at the dining room table listening to her husband and his colleagues discuss the makings of munitions and of the production of munitions. They're not fully aware that she's grasping what they're saying. So, long story short, that's just kind of a little bit in the background. And she decides to leave that life. She leaves her husband and is on a boat going to America, and just happens to bump into one of the movie moguls. He, of course, sees this beautiful woman and brings her to Hollywood, puts her in the movies, starts to make her a star, where again she runs into Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes really took a liking to her, and he would actually take her to his aircraft manufacturing facilities and again talk with her about how airplanes were made, really um, appreciating her mind and not just her beauty. So it was with the help of Howard Hughes that she was able to be given a little bit of a boost. Now, in her own home, she had a great lab, but he was able to provide her with a mobile lab that she could use during movie breaks to run experiments. So now begins World War II, and she's feeling pretty bad that she really wants to do something to help the effort. So she and a music composer, and again, this is pretty interesting because he's very aware of music, and music is very mathematical, and the frequencies of music. So the two of them put their heads together, and they came up and they were granted a patent for a frequency hopping guidance system for torpedoes. And this way, this could not be jammed by the enemies. This is what we now know as a precursor to Wi-Fi, GPS, Bluetooth. Unfortunately, the idea was not implemented. It lasted up until the patent expired before the military actually did look at it and went, I think we could use that idea. So, Hedy Lamar's technology is actually impacting us in an everyday way. Not only was that her only invention, but I mentioned a couple of other ones down at the bottom. She did discuss with Howard Hughes on how to improve wing designs. She took a look at the fastest birds and the fastest swimming fish, and kind of worked with Howard Hughes on ideas on developing better wings. She also developed an upgraded spotlight and a dissolvable Coca-Cola-like tablet. Remember, it's kind of like Coca-Cola, but not Coca-Cola, because you wouldn't want to infringe on their royalties. So, Hedy Lamarr. So, what got her to be such a great mind was her father's inspiration when she was young to just use that mind and question, always question what's going on. And let's see. Here's another one, Irene Barclay. Irene Barclay is considered to be the first female chartered surveyor in the United Kingdom. So, which means that she was what we would call in the States a registered surveyor in 1922. And she was only able to accomplish this after the 1919 Sex Disqualification Removal Act. So, in other words, you couldn't be barred from a profession based on your sex. And boy, she was just one of the first ones there in line to become a surveyor. She had a business for over 50 years, which was highly unusual back then. Even her partner, Evelyn Perry, in the business qualified the year after Irene, and she retired in 1972. Now, Irene's driving force was not really surveying, but it was housing reform. They had such an issue with the poverty and housing in the slums in that time, and so did America. New York City had that same crisis during right after the turn of the century. So she, through going through the slums and surveying and trying to lay out better subdivisions for poor housing is how that's what spurred her on. That was really her passion. So she also became an advocate for improving housing in these areas that were called the slums at the time. She also formed associations that the people could use to, like, for example, giving loans on buying the housing in the new area. I mean, if you were poor and you lived in these slums, you obviously didn't have money, so how could you move out into one of these better areas if you couldn't afford a loan to grant you the money to buy the housing? So Irene Barclay was quite a wonderful impact woman on the United Kingdom. While going through a lot of these women here, what I'm trying to do is encourage you to, by all means, ask questions, discuss them. Also, next week, as we have another session lined up for next week, I'm encouraging you to perhaps do a little research and bring a woman of your choice who has made an impact in the sciences or the mathematics or metrology. It doesn't have to be one in history, could be somebody we know in today. Beatrice Tilling Schilling. So this woman was an interesting, very interesting woman. I would have loved to have met her. She started out at she had some siblings, and they all went out for a bike race, and her siblings beat her because, of course, they were older. Well, she didn't want to be, she was a rather tough little girl at the time, and she went out and got a bicycle, and she learned how to take it apart, put it back together, and modified it such that she could then beat her sibling. Well, this led her at the age of 14 to buy her own motorcycle, a Royal Enfield, which of course she again learned how to dismantle and be able to rebuild and to modify to make it better, faster, quicker than anybody else's motorcycle. So thus she kind of had a name for herself of being a little bit of a race, enthusiast, be it bicycle or motorcycle at the time. Times being tough as they were, her first job was an apprentice as an electrician and lineman. Well, that's very unusual for the woman at that time, especially, given that the time that we're talking about, this is 1920s. But nonetheless, she then set herself up in the newly established National Society of Women's Service. She borrowed the money from the suffragists so that she could then go to university. And it was in university that she studied and became increasingly interested in engineering. Once she graduated from university, she went into the Royal Aircraft Establishment, where she remained throughout her whole career. And she was very tough for her to make her way in the engineering department, but let alone she became quite respected on the factory floor also. While touring the factory at one point, somebody kind of made a snide comment to her that she didn't know what she was talking about. So she asked the gentleman what he was doing, and he was making a weld. So she said, okay, you set up a workspace over there and set up another one for me over here, and we'll both weld the same, type of items, and we'll see who can do a better job. Well, let me tell you, they were impressed. Her weld was a very, very good weld, even better than the operator. So this woman had her own workshop at home. and she worked in the engineering department at Royal Aircraft Establishment. So Tilly Schilling came from, during World War II, the Spitfires would try to, during battle maneuvers, they had to do very drastic, going up into a high dive and then coming back down and quick turns. Well, the carburetor was was choking, and then when they go back up, it was being flooded with fuel. So she could look at the situation in a very easy manner and be able to break it down and would come up with a very, very simple answer. And it was basically taking a piece of metal the size of a shilling and putting a hole in it, and inserting this little shilling device into the carburetor of the Spitfires, and this actually cured the situation. Now, since this was a fix for the field aircraft, it's not something that was actually installed in all the aircraft, but the idea was then implemented into the next round of engine development. So, this one was quite an engineer. As I said, she was also a race enthusiast. So she's been known and given awards for modifying her motorcycle to go over 100 miles an hour during those days. That was quite impressive. And after her retirement, she was known for running around town in the most hot-top Triumph Dolomite Sprint, which I showed a picture. That's not hers down there, but that is a Dolomite Sprint for those who didn't know. So quite a woman. I'm gonna take a little drink to Tilly here. And I hope everybody's having a good day, a good week after the Labor Day week. Next on my list is a woman by the name of Alice Fletcher. Now, this is back in the USA. Alice Fletcher, if you look her up, she's called the first woman surveyor in the Americas, although she's not a registered surveyor. And but as you can see there, she's holding the papers and she's giving the men direction. So the Joe Gibbs, I believe, was the surveyor she hired to help her. But let me just back up a bit and give you a little bit about her. She, in 1853, so we're talking quite a while ago, she attended the Brooklyn Female Academy, and that's where she learned her teaching skills and leadership skills. But times were tough, and she had a really hard time getting a job, so she just kind of kept on teaching. And she found that she could also do research and write papers. That's what got her interested in Native Americans. And around 1870, she meets Putnam, who's director of the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology. She, through his help and assistance, becomes very interested in entomology. So she and Putnam go around together, and he kind of shows her the museum and gives her access to a lot of information, and she does wonderful research. Well, around the late 1870s, she actually meets a couple of Omaha Indians in Boston, is very intrigued by them because it fits into her studies, and she volunteers to do what's known as actually the first field study. She's going to go out to Nebraska and she's going to observe the Omaha Indians and record their culture, their song, their dances, their methods. And she's going to do this by going out there and living with them. But when she gets out there, she gets so wrapped up with the people. And during this time, this is the time when the government had taken lands and given them to a tribe. So none of the Indians themselves individually own any land. But yet you have all of these settlers coming in who are able to file with the United States government to own a parcel of land. So after her work there, she, as well as many others, go to Washington and advocate that the United States government should let the Indians buy their tract of land. And that will then motivate them to cultivate the land and do good for themselves. So Alice, with many others, advocated in Washington. They won. Washington agreed. It was called the Dawes Act. And they sent Alice back out to Nebraska to help implement the first land allotment. That's when she brought her surveyors out there. She's standing there with her paper, and she's making sure that each Indian is given his full 80 acres. There are no deviations. There are no barroom surveys going on, that actual piece of land is real, and that for Indian now owns this piece of land. And that the deed to the land is signed over to that Native American. She did such a good job in Nebraska that the U.S. Congress went ahead and sent her back out west, and she worked for many years with the surveyors, allotting lands to the Native Americans. So it was a very harsh environment. You could see her there in her full, Edwardian type dress, but she's living in a teepee, mind you. She lived just like the Indians lived. It was a very hard life. It nearly killed her during one point. She was working out, it was raining, got cold. It took her 8 months to recover from getting sick during that time. So, and she was still in Nebraska. The Indians did take good care of her, nursed her back to health. So, again, it was her passion, though, of assisting the Native Americans and making sure that they had their proper allotment of land. And that's what inspired her to go out into the field and work with these surveyors. And even though she wasn't a surveyor herself, she was there. One article I read said that she would travel behind them in her buggy and she would count the number of times that her wheels would go around. She even tied a little hanky to one of the spokes. And she realized that this would only work when the land was level and flat. So she tried to do her part. I think that was kind of cute, tying the hanky to the spoke of the wheel and then counting how many times it went around. Very, very clever. Oh. The next one I'd like to kind of discuss is somebody from Australia. And not in 1922. I am sorry. I put down the wrong date on that. I'm sorry, but Narrow Underwood is the first Surveyor General in Australia. Oh my goodness. She is only 32 years old when she ascended to the position, and from what she reviews with me and shares on the net is that in New South Wales in Australia, there's only 32 female surveyors. I am not sure. Did I fall off? I'm not sure. Hopefully everybody can still see my screen. Anyway, in Australia, she is the youngest surveyor general at 32. That's also the same number of female surveyors in her division, which is only 3% of the population. And in Australia, they only make up 25% of the female population in spatial industry. Basically, Narelle and her husband were in a having dinner somewhere where they've actually have pictures of all those different surveyor generals of New South Wales all around the place. And her husband had commented, wouldn't it be nice to see your picture up there next? And that thought kind of implemented into her brain, and she thought, well, why not? Why can't my picture be up there? Okay, and that's true. Why can't our picture be up there also? Narelle also promotes heavily the professional society involvement. She's an advisor, she's on boards. As a surveyor general, she is required to be on quite a few of these boards, but she's also doing it in above and beyond. She's very active in the STEM activities in Australia, where in 2019 she was considered the superstar of STEM, and I guess in 2019 that's what they were showing, that only 27% of females are in STEM type jobs. So a woman of today, I'm not sure what actually got her into surveying, but her passion to actually say, hey, why can't my picture be, just because I'm female, be next in line as the next surveyor general? So even she had it with herself to, you know, break that glass ceiling, as they say. Feel free to join in, anybody, if you have a comment. That's kind of
Hi, Raina.
Kind of just a few women that I kind of said, hi.
Didn't want to leave you there all alone. We've been navigating in the back here some interesting challenges with the cameras and whatnot. But I've enjoyed story time here and listening about all these other wonderful women in measurement.
Well, thank you, thank you. Yes, again, inviting anybody to join in. And again, next week, if you have time to join us, please do. We'll be able to share screens with anybody else if they'd like to talk about, or even just talk about another woman that you might know in science and history.
Raina, one of my thoughts as I was listening to, oh, sorry about that. There might be a delay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
One of my thoughts as I was listening to you go through this list of different women were the variety of them in surveying and who got into measurement and surveying so early on. And considering metrology and measurement and how we get more and more accurate over time, what are your thoughts behind why women would be drawn to that? You know, I think I have my own ideas. It's probably, hey, there was something to be measured, there was land, this was important, and that was probably the most critical thing at the time. But what are your thoughts into why surveying? Why do you think that's where women entered into measurement?
My even personal experience is because it's a job that you can have where you're doing outside work as well as inside work. So for those who enjoy the outdoors, to be paid to go outside, you know, run around, take some measurements, and then be able to come indoors when you're ready to make your maps or finish up all of your data your So you kind of have the best of both worlds as far as your field work involves going outside and enjoying the outdoors, and then you get to come in and do your engineering job where you sit at a desk and actually, you know, drop the maps or prepare reports on whatever the end result or the customer may need. I think it's that outdoor indoor thing that probably gets people into surveying. Now from there, I'm hoping that they will find the world of industrial metrology, because industrial metrology really doesn't grasp people the way surveying does.
I think they see more surveying. Yeah, I think they see more surveying, and you know, if I think about my own childhood, growing up, I grew up in a bigger family with a lot of brothers and cousins and a sister and female cousins as well. But a lot of when I was growing up, my sister and my cousins, the female ones, would often play indoors and the boys were running around outside, and I like the outdoors, like what you're saying. So I found myself running around outside as much as them. So I think, you know, looking back at some of these women in history, I wonder if they felt that same thing. What's a reason I can go outside? You know, the traditional female roles where make sure you're cooking, make sure you understand how to cook and how to put the home together. What's going to get me outside? Let me go be a surveyor. Then I can get out.
and that's a perfect lead-in for kind of what I threw together here is in traditional roles, you've got over here on my left-hand side of the screen, whether they're woodworking, okay, you've got to lay out and you've got to measure and mark, or if you're going to do any kind of modification to your house, which is shown in the upper left-hand corner there. You've got plans there, so those plans have to then correlate into measurements on a tape. But if I look over at the girls' side on the right-hand side, the girls who got into sewing, that was kind of like, hey, I've got this pattern here, and now I've got to translate those plans onto this paper and actually produce. So, when I kind of thought about it that way, I was like, we did have an avenue as girls. It just that sewing portion, sometimes appeals and doesn't appeal. Because if you're not into, as a girl, they said fashion, well, then you're not going to get into sewing. And if you're an outside girl, you're going to take more to, like you said, hey, I'm going to go help dad measure this wood and hold it while he cuts it or something, rather than, yeah, mom, yeah, I'll hold this fabric for you while you cut it. But the measurements are there. And that one in the middle with the micrometer measuring the sandwich, I thought was just way funny. So I had to put it in there.
That's really great. That tells you whether or not you got enough veggies on the sandwich, or maybe need some extra inside there.
Maybe it's a quality control over at Subway sandwiches.
Yeah,
oh,
that's my first introduction to quality control. My father was a chef, and periodically I would see him sneak some of the desserts or something off and eat it, and he always referred to it as quality control in cooking. So when I got into manufacturing, I thought quality control is something completely different than what I had grown up with, but the same purpose.
Oh, goodness.
Hi, Rena,
Yeah,
Michelle,
so...
it's Keith.
Hi, Keith.
Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you both? I've sent a question in the chat, but I thought I'll just interrupt. Sorry. I wanted to ask you both what has been your biggest challenge during your metrology careers?
Well, let's see. I guess biggest challenge during metrology career was so I want to take that as a profession, as a career for me. Excuse me, Michelle, don't mind. I'll answer first and then I'll let you jump in. I was told I was going to, in order to be promoted, I was told I was going to have to leave doing work on the factory floor. And that to me was a big hindrance. In the end, it ended up being good for me because I left and my career then got better after leaving. As far as being a woman in the predominantly male dominated business that we're in, the hardest time, I guess it's just being comfortable being around a lot of men all the time, okay, which is not that bad. But on the factory floor, some of the guys can be pretty mean, and being able to have enough confidence in myself and not be shaking in my shoes when I went up to that person and said, hey, if you've got a problem, come deal it with me rather than, doing something else. And that was my biggest hardship, and I didn't have a problem after that. Otherwise, I think 99.9% of the people that I meet in my metrology industry have been wonderful people, just wonderful people. Of course, hey, everybody's got their rotten eggs. I'll just say that instead of a bad word. But really, I've had nothing but wonderful people. Michelle?
I agree. I agree with the most having wonderful people. You do have to have a level of confidence, or maybe it's even blindness at first for not realizing that you're a smaller number out in front of all the men. I can remember being at a dinner one time with a larger group, and a waitress came over to to say, hey, you know, you must be really confident to be out here with in this group of 30 and you're the only female. And it wasn't until she said that, I'd been with these guys all day, not until she said that did I realize that I was actually the only woman there. I think that's important, Rena. You know, as you and I go, you have to have that confidence and just not see yourself as different in order to, you know, hide in a corner or shy away. I think if you see that, then you tend to lose confidence. If you just continue to have it be something that you like and have that confidence, then you don't feel out of place. And for the most part, same as you, Rena, you know, most people are welcoming. Most people don't, in the metrology world, I think we're also excited about that next thing, or, you know, how something goes together, or finding the problem and the root cause of why two things aren't going together or something isn't right. We get caught up in that. We want that solution, and the excitement's around that, and it's all hands on deck. It's usually not a who's there and why should you be here. If there is a challenge, though, I would say it was in the early days. I don't know if it was so much being a female or my age going into the factory floors. In either case, as I was first out of college and going there, there was a level of how do I gain that credibility? How do I get them to pay attention to me and not think I'm just someone who's lost and walking around out here? But I would say that's probably true of anyone as they first start into industry, you know, finding your footing and realizing or having others realize that you have something important to contribute and something important to say. But that comes with time, and I've found the group overall to be very welcoming, especially in finding this this CMS group. It's been fun.
Thank you both, because that was really interesting. I was just going to follow up, if that's all right. I'm sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you change anything? Would you do it different?
I'll let you go first, Rena.
Okay. You know what? No, I don't think I would change a thing. I've enjoyed everybody I met along my path. You know, sometimes we say stupid things and, you know, make stupid mistakes, but that's being human. But I don't think I would change a thing. You know, maybe run for chairman CMSC one time previously, you know, not again in my older age, but, you know, something like that. I've run for chairman a few times, and just being able to support CMS, I'm trying to do as much as I can. So, but I don't think I would change a thing. Michelle?
I agree. I've enjoyed my career and the things that come along with it. If I had anything to look at differently, I will say for a large portion early in my career, I spent a lot of time trying to not draw attention to the fact that I was a woman in this field. You know, not obviously, you know, I'm a woman and I'm here, but I didn't want to make that a thing. I just wanted to be present and be Michelle and be the next person on the team. Now that I'm older, I recognize that there's a benefit to pulling up and pulling along and welcoming in other women and ensuring that that we're there for each other as a community to help build that confidence, right? You know, you've got to have someone else helping you along, someone else to tell you that yes, you belong, yes, you can be here, yes, you can keep doing these things, especially when you do run into a bad egg here and there, which you're going to find in any industry, in any place. But if you don't have someone, you know, a friend, a colleague, a peer to say, hey, that's don't worry about that, shake it off, let's go, you're doing a great job, then you might exit, you know. And I wish I would have, if there's one thing I would do differently, it would be to take that extra step when I was earlier in my career to make sure I reached out and created those networks more actively. I didn't realize how important that would be early on. And if I have advice to anyone entering into the industry, that's what I would say. In any industry, create that network, create those bonds and friendships, because it's important. And it's important from a professional standpoint to have others you can go to, questions you can ask, advice you can get beyond just your local company, your local team. Having other people to compare experiences to will help you to have new ideas in advance.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's really,
couldn't agree more.
really,
Yes.
really interesting. Thank you for that. And I'm sorry, because I've got lots of questions I was going to ask you, but I don't want to hog the limelight with it. But do you have a particular measurement hero or somebody like that that you look up to? Is there a particular person or anything else? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
I have particular things that I like. I haven't thought much about a person. I'll have to think about that. But lasers have always been my favorite technology in the space. I don't know, Rena, what about you? Do you have a favorite tool, a favorite technology, or a favorite person?
Well, I have to admit, I've worked with some tool makers who I have felt have just been, ingenious. Okay. So some of those people that I've met on the factory floor and I've worked for years, what they have to come up with and what they can do with nothing amazes me. So I really have to say that probably some of the tool makers I've met in my life are more of what I would consider my metrology heroes, because they not only do they have to take their machining skills and millwright skills and assembly skills, these measurement skills, they went from using templates on the floor and transits and levels to now being able to use a computer and a laser. So some of these people, these older guys, and I'm sorry, they're probably about to exit our workforce. I admire the way that they were able to be ingenious, to be able to adapt as much as our technology has in their career. So yeah, some of those tool makers, I'm going to have to say.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always interesting when you go into a new place and you see what someone has done and what they've been able to do with hand tools over time, and to see how the technology has evolved to what we can do today and what we can capture. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back next time with a favorite person, Rena. I'm gonna have a favorite person, or maybe two, and I'm gonna tell you who they are next time. So we'll leave that as a carrot hanging.
Well, when I read about Alice Fletcher, the Indians called her the measuring woman. I just had to go read about her. Unfortunately, she never was a registered or chartered surveyor, but you could tell her she had those boys in line. She had those chainmen going and making sure that all the proper notes were taken. Oh. I'm going to skip to a next slide here. Hopefully people can see it. I found this, I was kind of cruising through this study, and I found it interesting that the study kind of shows in the first set of results is what basically US adults think. And then the second set of graphs show basically what a society of scientists think. Okay. And in the first set on the left-hand side, it basically says that the US adults don't think that we're doing very well in our K-12 STEM, and neither do the scientists. But if you look at the one on the right-hand side, basically the scientists don't think that the general public knows a lot about science. So if the general public, your average Joe, doesn't know a lot about science, it's going to be hard for that person to pass that down to their offspring, that interest. And I thought that was kind of interesting because in a lot of things we focus on STEM, we focus on the young kids, but we haven't quite captured their parents also. So I kind of thought that was interesting, a bit of information that we really do need to work. We are working on the youth, granted we need to continue our work there, but we also can try to capture the interest of the adults too. I thought that was pretty interesting. When I did go around and look a little bit to see what different societies might be doing to interest children, I basically found 2 pages of American surveyors that publish posters. And one page, and this is, let me jump down to the next slide here. So, I was kind of thinking about how can we capture inquisitive minds, not just youth, but anybody's inquisitive mind. And let me back up that in 2016, they came out with Pokemon Go. And lots of people all of a sudden knew what coordinates were, okay? Before that, nobody knew what a coordinate was or what a geolocation was. So that game in itself really did open up a lot of doors, but I think since then it's petered out. I don't hear anybody talking about Pokemon Go. I don't see people holding their little games in their hands as they're walking around the street like they did when it first came out in 2016. Michelle, did you have any interest in Pokemon Go? And I know your children are too young for that, but maybe somebody else out there,
yeah,
our audience,
I did.
actually.
I did, and I even it was more people at work, and then I got my kids into it a little bit, but there were people at work playing it, and I had to figure out what it was because you can't, not know what everybody's talking about, and it became something. It became something very entertaining from time to time. In fact, I think I even have a picture with the granite table doing some measurements, and suddenly one of the Pokemon showed up on the granite table, and we got a screenshot of it. So not only did it introduce people to geolocation, but also to augmented reality. it was kind of fun.
That's funny. That's funny.
There was one time when that became very popular that I was walking around in a park and I thought something had happened. There must be some event, something had just happened tragically because there were so many people around. And it turns out it was the Pokemon game. They were all in this one park gathered because this Pokemon game had brought them there. But it is pop culture things like this that have a big impact. When it comes to things like the space race, got everybody suddenly interested in engineering. And you saw a spike in engineering at that time. You saw World War II with the increase in manufacturing that had people with a spike in interest in tolerancing because now things had to go together and they had to fit on a larger scale. So to see these things throughout history and these driving factors to get people interested, it makes you wonder, what is that next thing that requires measurement that can get us into opening up more broadly the interest in the metrology segment?
Absolutely. Maybe I'll have to Google and see if any of the next games are coming out with something, geolocation again. And that might spur some more interest into the measurements. Does anybody else out there have an experience that they want to share, either with Pokemon Go or just anything else? By all means, just unmute yourself and join on in.
Hey there, everyone. I just wanted to know, it's Yana here. I just wanted to know who's here.
Hello, Yana. Let's see, Keith or Matt, because I don't think I can see the full list. Do you want to join in, please, and kind of read off? And I'm sorry, oh, that was Michelle who spoke before. I didn't see her on my list. So that was Michelle Edwards from Faro. Hi, Michelle, and thank you.
Hello.
Rena, I'm here. I could definitely read the list. I just want to make sure it's okay with everyone who's attended to be called out as being on this call. So we have Yana Baker, Dakota Hines, Parker, sorry, Dakota Haynes, Michael Raphael, and Scott Sandwith that are still on right now, as well as Michelle, Rena, myself, and Keith.
Okay. I believe we had a few more earlier, but people have dropped off since. So,
Yes.
Yana, what I would like to do is at the end of the third session, kind of ask people if they would like to join in on a mutual help email group that I'll put together. And just have people kind of send me off to the side that if they wouldn't mind being available as a resource for the rest of us who want to join this little group. You know, if you have a question and you feel, you know, sometimes, hey, I might feel embarrassed. Sometimes I might think that I have a question that's really, you know, oh my God, it's so stupid, you know, it's so simple, but I can't remember the answer. So I may only call one person and say, hey, do you remember when we did yada yada? What was that again? So sometimes you don't want to talk to everybody, you just want to do an individual. So at the end of the third one, and I realize now that maybe not everybody can join all 3 sessions. So if you'd like to, go ahead and send me an email. I don't know if there's one on here that talks about the go-to meeting at cmsc.org.
Rena, one other thing, just to let everyone
We are
know, after tonight's meeting, within about 2 days, you'll receive an email, and in that email will contain a link to email the women in metrology, Michelle and Rena, and it could start a forum for you guys as well. So you will get a follow-up email within 2 days.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for joining. I know we're reaching the end of our time. We will kind of pick up next week with talking about, you know, how to capture an inquisitive mind and a few other items, whatever anybody would like to discuss. So we'll probably even take a look at some of these websites and, you know, see what captures adults, captures, you know, minds of children also. So
I'll tell you my
to everybody,
favorite
thank you so
elements
much.
when we come back next week, Rena.
Yes, yes, we'll have you on camera next week too.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Good night.